This is the iPhone 13 mini, the last sub 6-inch flagship model Apple has released. The mini lineup was so unsuccessful as a lineup that they discontinued it after just 2 years. But why would Apple discontinue what I think is the best phone they have made in years? And in a world where the iPhone 16 Pro Max is likely to be almost 7 inches diagonally, can a phone that is almost half the volume of Apple's latest flagship still hold up in 2024? So this is what I believe is the best smartphone that Apple has released in the past 5 years, or at least a top 3 smartphone that they've released in the past 5 years. Obviously, this phone is as good as basically any modern flagship, especially any modern flagship that Apple has released. Most phones in the last 10 years haven't been much different, and this one is just so remarkable. The size, the form factor is great. This phone actually fits in your pockets because it's small enough to actually fit in your pocket, and it's not just like a cheaper, smaller phone like the iPhone SE is. This is a flagship phone, but just shrunk down to a non-flagship form factor. What it feels a lot like actually is it feels very similar to an iPhone 4S. It's got a very similar design. It's got that matte metal edges and then a glass front and a glass back. These phones feel identical to me. Basically, this one's a lot smaller. I would actually prefer if this was the size of the iPhone 16 mini if they were to make one of those, which is unlikely, but this is actually like the best form factor ever. Now, I've used its older brother, the iPhone 12 mini, for the past year as my main device. This phone is everything that this phone is and a little bit more. Slightly better battery life, slightly better performance, slightly better cameras. Everything about it is just slightly better. And it's also in pink, which I think is kind of cool. I mean, I prefer it not to be in pink, but this is the cheapest one I could find on eBay, so I'm stuck with it. The iPhone 13 mini features the A15 Bionic chip, which is only marginally slower than the A17 Bionic released last year. It only features a paltry 4GB of RAM, which has not affected my day-to-day, but is still pretty embarrassing compared to any other modern phone released in the last 5 years. It has 2 rear-facing 12-megapixel cameras, a wide and an ultra-wide camera, 2340 by 1080 Retina OLED display with support for HDR, True Tone, the P3 wide color gamut, haptic touch, which is not as good as 3D touch, and 800 nits max brightness. This is the fortunate thing about modern smartphones. Their lifespans have increased so dramatically, with the only thing holding them back being battery degradation. And this 2,406 milliamp hour battery isn't the largest thing and will more than likely need to be replaced. In terms of pricing and buying it today, they're really hard to find new. I actually had trouble finding them new. You can buy them on Amazon for about $350 or on eBay for about $320, which is a pretty good price. But when you start to compare it to an iPhone SE 2022, which has the same chipset, or if you compare it to an iPhone 12 mini, which is just a year older, the pricing starts to get maybe a little bit higher than what I think it might be worth, but you just get a lot more with this phone. Comparing it to the iPhone SE 2022, which is what I think is probably its best comparison. Obviously, all day, every day, I'm going to choose the 13 mini. It's a more expensive phone, so everything about it's just better. The screen's better, the camera's better, everything's just a little bit better about it. But the biggest thing for me about this phone is that it has that second camera and it's a much wider camera lens. And as somebody who turns the camera on himself and films himself quite a bit with his family and just for YouTube in general, I just find that that extra feature is important enough to me where I would pay an extra $150 for it. Obviously, if you're not somebody that does that, I think you could probably get away with an iPhone SE 2022 and be just as happy as you would be using this phone. Obviously, you're not gonna get Face ID with this, but you do get Touch ID, and they each have their own benefits. This screen's a little bit worse, and if you're somebody that's trying to use their phone a little bit less, I would probably lean actually towards the iPhone SE, unless you have a really good handle on your screen time, just because this phone's gonna be a little bit less enticing to watch content on versus this phone, because the screen's like pretty incredible. While the 12 and 13 mini are 2 of Apple's worst performing phones in terms of sales, it doesn't change the fact that in general, they are actually some of the best phones that they've released, able to fit all modern features in a minuscule form factor compared to modern phones. The mini lineup holds a special place in my heart, but the future looks pretty bleak for a successor to the 13 mini. It begs the question, will Apple release an iPhone 16 mini this September? So what is the future? Is there going to be a future? Are we going to get an iPhone 16 mini? Probably not. Unfortunately, I just don't think that's in the cards. As the worst selling phone, Apple is not going to make and develop another phone that they know is just going to be the worst selling model. I think what will more than likely happen is that they will probably bring this form factor they have with this phone and sort of merge it with the SE lineup and turn the iPhone SE 2024 or 2025 into basically the iPhone 16 mini, however they name it, doesn't really matter. I imagine they'll probably bring Face ID to it, bring the smaller screen, and sort of all the things that I like about this phone into the iPhone SE 2025 or whenever they decide to release that, if they choose to release it. The unfortunate thing is that people just want tablets in their pockets, and I kind of can't stand that. I want a smaller phone that I can fit my entire hand around. As somebody with tiny little hands, I want to be able to fit my entire hand. I want to be able to reach the entire screen just with my thumb. So at the end of the day, they're probably not going to release another one. I really do believe this is one of the best smartphones that Apple has ever released though. And if you're considering buying one, I would say go for it. It's a remarkably good phone, and you're not gonna have any complaints if you go ahead and buy it. Thank you for watching. This has been Scott with Techno Eclipse. Peace out.